Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, guys, I want to talk about the possibility of the Toronto Maple Leafs trading for Patrick Kane. Because the other day on the Daily Faceoff podcast, Frank Saravalli mentioned that Toronto could be one of the teams that he would be willing to accept a trade to. We'll go over the salary cap specifics and what I think it would cost the Maple Leafs to acquire him in a trade a little bit later on in the video. But for now, I just want to touch on Patrick Kane, the player, because we all know him as Showtime, but he's 33, turning 34 in November, and he is on the final year of that contract that he signed way back in 2014 that carries a $10.5 million cap hit. Kane spent the majority of last year playing with both Alex DeBrincat and Dylan Strome and had 92 points in 78 games last year. And over the last 3 years, he's 7th in points with 242. So he still is one of the elite point-producing forwards in the NHL. Now, here's where we need to have a conversation, because usually I would like to break a player's production down. Look at his numbers at 5-on-5, on the power play, who he's playing with, where he's putting up those points on the ice, where he's scoring his goals, and then determine if that's something that the Toronto Maple Leafs really need. But in the case of Patrick Kane, if you're looking at this player card from evolvinghockey.com, it definitely doesn't paint the picture of somebody who's 7th in the NHL over the last 3 years with 242 points. So is this Patrick Kane maybe regressing a little bit? I mean, it's possible. He was 32, turning 33. He's not in the prime of his career anymore, but still, he had 92 points. Is this a problem with the advanced analytics? I mean, do we just need more context on top of this? Where is the disconnect coming from? Now, Patrick Kane did lead all forwards in the NHL last year in 5-on-5 time on ice per game. So this could be a case of the per 60 numbers just weighing down the overall picture. But, you know, when you're looking at the totals, 92 points is 92 points. But Patrick Kane has been among the league leaders for forwards when it comes to 5-on-5 time on ice per game almost his entire career. And if we're looking at the numbers from the 1920 season and then the following year in 2020, 2021, and then finally back to last year, we can see it's been a steady decline for Patrick Kane over the last 3 years, but yet the point production is still there. Whether it be carrying the puck, distributing it, or shooting it, Patrick Kane is still the elite offensive player that we've known him to be basically his entire career. And I think the disconnect between the evolving hockey player card and what we're seeing here in the micro stats stems from the fact that, you know, there's only so much offense to go around on a team like the Blackhawks who weren't very good last year. You know, relative to his teammates, Patrick Kane was still an effective player. But offensively, anyway, defensively is something entirely different. And he's a bit of a liability there. So it's probably also a case of less being more for him and a more specific role, offensively oriented, of course, with the right line mates. Patrick Kane can still give you, 90 to 100 points. So now the questions become, what would the Maple Leafs even have to give up to acquire Patrick Kane? Is it even a good idea? Does it make sense? And what would the salary cap implications be? If you're trying to assess Kane's trade value, there just hasn't been a lot of elite forwards traded in recent years with high cap hits and 1 year remaining on their contracts at either the start of the season or even at the trade deadline. It's not impossible to move out that $10.5 million number, but if you're looking at the 3 teams who he would allegedly accept a trade to in the Oilers, the Leafs, and the Rangers, all 3 teams are either at or above the salary cap already. So even if the Blackhawks were to retain 50%, all 3 of those teams would look to have to either move money out first or get a third team involved. The most recent comparable that I can think of is when the Philadelphia Flyers traded Claude Giroux to the Florida Panthers at last year's trade deadline. Giroux had an over $8 million cap hit. His deal was expiring at the end of the season. They needed to retain a lot of money. There weren't a lot of teams that could really make the money work. And they ended up getting Owen Tippett, a former 10th overall pick who's 24 years old right now, who's kind of struggled to establish himself at the NHL level, a first and a third round pick. You can debate which player is better or more effective offensively, but what's not a debate is which player is better defensively, and that's Claude Giroux by a mile. He also plays center compared to Kane being a winger. I'm just not going to split hairs when it comes to their trade value because I think their situations are so similar in the sense that both players have total no move clauses. They control exactly where they want to go. 1 year remaining on their deal at a very high cap hit. And I mean, of the 3 teams that Frank Saravalli listed who allegedly Patrick Kane would waive his no-move clause for, Toronto, New York, and Edmonton, if 2 out of 3 of those teams come back and say, we can't make the money work, well, then that swings a lot of leverage in favor of the team who can. And very similarly, with Claude Giroux, there was a lot of reports initially saying, hey, the Avalanche are very interested in this guy. They're heavily pursuing this guy. But then they went out and acquired Terry Lehkonen, Josh Manson, and then they just couldn't make the money work afterwards. And the Florida Panthers were really the only team that was left. And that's what they got. Owen Tippett, a first, and a third. This is not a sweepstakes where everyone can just keep bidding up each other. This is a very selective sale that is invite only, and there are very few invites being sent out. Whether or not this is a good idea for the Toronto Maple Leafs is yet to be seen. I don't think that this trade happens before the start of the season. I think if it does, it's something that gets done closer to the trade deadline. And by then, hopefully, we have some questions that we have right now about the team answered. You know, how's that goaltending tandem going to hold up? If Jake Muzzin can stay healthy over the course of the year, those 2 things would obviously affect what the Maple Leafs would like to do compared to what maybe they need to do at the trade deadline to be competitive. You know, we're going to get to see some younger players, hopefully up at the forward spot, guys like Joey Anderson and Alex Steeves and Nick Robertson, and how they play a part, because if they do decide to move forward and do a Patrick Kane deal, eventually it's going to be the only deal that they make, because logistically, asset wise and salary cap wise, it would just be impossible to afford to do anything else, even with getting a third team involved and an additional 50% salary retained. It was reported on about a week or so ago that the negotiations with Rasmus Sandin are sort of at a standstill. And I really should do a standalone video on Rasmus Sandin. I've done videos where I've sort of talked about it here and there, but I'll probably do that in the next couple of days, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you're not missing anything as we move into the start of a new season. But if the Maple Leafs decide that they want to make him available in a trade, would a first-round pick in Rasmus Sandin get that done? Would that be too much? Would they need to add a little bit more? Do you tinker around with the money? Do you throw Alex Kerfoot into the deal and maybe make it a little bit bigger? Maybe it's not just Patrick Kane coming back from the Chicago Blackhawks. Maybe there's another player, and we can make this part of a larger deal. If the goaltending holds and Jake Muzzin is able to stay healthy, the next logical spot to look to add would be that forward group because of how inconsistent their second line was last season. And if you're adding Patrick Kane to that top 6, I mean, really the reason why he would want to, if it's no move clause to come to Toronto, would be to play with Austin Matthews. So then at that point, if you're reuniting Mitch Marner with John Tavares, you know, who knows? John Tavares had a bit of an up and down season, but still finished at or around a point per game last year. You know, coming off of the neck injury, didn't really have a whole lot of time to train last offseason. Comes into the year maybe a step behind, and it's hard to play catch up. So I'm looking for him to have a bounce back year after just being healthy this offseason. So we'll have to see how it goes, obviously. It would be sick. It'd be sick to add a guy like Patrick Kane to this offense. It would be really cool to see how they would work on the power play. It would really be cool to see him and Austin Matthews play together. It'd be nice. You know, you got the 2 Americans, the 2 Canadians kind of dominating there, and then William Nylander is just left to be William Nylander, and that's the guy who leads the Maple Leafs in playoff scoring the last 2 years. So, we'll see. 132 points in 136 career playoff games, 3 Stanley Cups, a Conn Smythe, a Hart Trophy, an Art Ross Trophy, still producing at an elite level. It's something to consider. Whether or not I would want Patrick Kane on the team, I don't know how to answer that question right now. Because like I said, there's a lot of questions that we have about this team that we're not going to have answers to probably until midway through the year. And then at that point, maybe more questions pop up and you might need to answer them. Like I said, it might be a situation for the Maple Leafs at this year's trade deadline where it's what they need to do versus what they want to do. Do I want Patrick Kane on the team in an ideal world? Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. Do they need Patrick Kane? I don't know yet. Obviously, by the length of this video, it's a bit of a loaded question, but I'm going to pose it to you guys anyway. Do you want Patrick Kane on the Toronto Maple Leafs? Do you think that he could help them, you know, get over that hump and be the difference maker in the playoffs? Let me know down in the comment section what your thoughts and opinions are. And make sure to like the video if you did like it and subscribe for more because more is always on the way. And guys, I'll see you in the next one.